Hey guys, it's Neon, and we're going to talk about comic books. I know when we first started the channel, we talked about comic books a lot more than we do now, but the truth is there really hasn't been a lot of news on the mainstream comic book industry other than it's dying. It's kind of depressing, and it's hard to really make fun of the comic book industry as it's dying, because even though there are some what I believe to be ridiculous people working in the industry right now, it's still very, very sad to see comics in the state that it is in. And, it feels a bit unfair, I think, to talk about the comic book industry dying. It's sort of like, punching an elderly person in the retirement home or something, beating them with some soap in a sock or something like that and stealing their jewelry. It's just, it's in a very sad state. So what we haven't talked about in a very, very long time is ComicsGate, the infamous ComicsGate. You're not allowed to talk about it. Well, here's the thing. Nobody's really talking about it in the news media either. It's almost like about a year ago, everybody just kind of stopped talking about it, save for a few exceptions. Bleeding Cool, every couple of weeks decides that they're going to take a shot at comic skaters. Last year, there was some dust kicked up about ComicsGate in a couple of publications that I believe had connections to people who worked in, I guess, comic book blogging. And then it kind of died out. Other than Bleeding Cool, we haven't seen much on ComicsGate. It's not even really, other than like Ethan Van Sciver's ComicsGate Live, people aren't really... I think it seems to me like it's transitioning into just indie comics. That's my armchair take on it. I see a lot of people doing indie comics who a year ago, 2 years ago would have been called ComicsGate by the comic book media outlets, the blogs. They would have called them ComicsGate, but now it's just a lot of creators just doing indie comics and working outside of the system because it's very, very broken. And it's dying. It's dying. It's not a sustainable way to make a living for most people these days. And there are folks out there, trying to find a better way to do things. And I applaud people who are, because, personally, I kind of walked away from the comic book industry because the money just wasn't there. It wasn't a good use of my time. It was actually costing me money to work in comics. It's very, very sad, because as a kid, that is literally all I wanted to do for a living, was make comic books. And then when I finally got there and I saw what the money was like and that it was declining as years went on, it's like, this just doesn't work anymore. So the point of all of this being is that, very few blogs have talked about ComicsGate at all, but for some reason, yesterday, Comic Book Resources decided that they were going to talk about Alan Moore taking a parting shot at ComicsGate. Now, the funny thing is, they're saying this is his retirement FU to ComicsGate. I don't know if Alan Moore follows ComicsGate very closely. I do know he's about 2 years late to the party. I mean, literally, like, everybody, all the pros were bashing ComicsGate 2017, 2018. Alan, you are way late to the party. So, and the fact that Comic Book Resources made an article out of this is kind of crazy too, because literally nobody else is talking about it right now, other than self-identified comics gators, which tend to keep to themselves for the most part. You're not hearing a whole lot about it, at least in the mainstream blogs. So I had to look at this and laugh, because Alan Moore actually retired years ago. He retired 3 years ago, and this was actually on the same day, Comic Book Resources. Yes, Alan Moore announced his retirement from comics 3 years ago. So why is it making the rounds now? Because The Guardian decided they were going to republish the story online with a banner from 2016. Yeah, I've seen a lot of these blogs, a lot of these newspapers now. They're doing this funny little thing to stay at the top of Google News results. They change the dates of the articles. They recycle content. But then, of course, Comic Book Resources, they're gonna latch on Parasite style to old news, 3-year-old news, and turn it into an anti-ComicsGate article. just weird. I mean, it's like parasites eating each other. It's crazy. So we're going to read this, and then we're going to talk about, I guess, the state of the comic book industry now a little bit, because we haven't talked about that in a while. And I've been trying to keep tabs on it, but I really do think, I mean, for those of you who watch the channel for comic book content, if it hasn't been made painfully clear to you at this point, if you want to make comic books, do not bank on the mainstream comic book industry, because we really don't know how long it's going to be around. If you want to make comic books, and there are a lot of you I know that watch this channel that do, your best bet right now is just do your own thing. Do it yourself. Crowdfunder. Find another way to do comic books, but don't work in the mainstream comic book industry, because it's volatile. It's volatile. You're not going to retire with a watch. Okay? The only thing you're going to retire with, if you continue to work in the mainstream comic book industry, is working in comics to probably working as a Walmart greeter with years and years of resentment in your heart. So don't do that. Now, I don't think Alan Moore is going to be working as a Walmart greeter. Could you imagine, though? Wouldn't that be pretty cool? Wouldn't that be frightening? That'd be absolutely frightening. Okay, so writer Alan Moore seems set to retire from comics. He already retired. He announced it years ago. With the release of The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, Volume 4, The Tempest, number 6, try saying that 5 times fast, on which he's working with artist Kevin O'Neill. However, the legendary comics writer didn't leave the business without making a statement on ComicsGate. The letter reads, "Dear Alan Kev, as a middle-aged conservative incel sitting wedged behind my keyboard, trolling AOC with my Batman t-shirt covered in Pringles, can I just ask with a straight face why you're leaving the comics business? Yours, Hiram J. ComicsGate III from Oklahoma, everybody. Oklahoma. The response from Moore and O'Neill is an equally tongue-in-cheek response, reading at one point, "You're the most intelligent and appreciative we could have ever hoped for." The letter is a joke written by Moore, as each issue of the series features an obviously fake letter for the creative team to answer. Although Moore has been slowly withdrawing from mainstream comics for years, he publicly announced his intention to retire in 2014. He reaffirmed it in 2016, saying The Tempest 6 would bring his career as a comics writer to an end. Okay, so here we go, blah, 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 factual. Then we get to the bottom. ComicsGate is a group that considers itself against forced diversity and progressive values in the comic book industry, claiming it's led to a decline in sales. The movement has previously been denounced by such creators as Jeff Lemire and Bill Sienkiewicz. Because CBR.com says it's so, that means it's so, right? I just think it's very funny he'd already announced this. So where is the comic book industry right now? Well, not in a very good place. Now, this month they did have a pretty big hit with Black Cat. I guess it sold over 200,000 copies, which hasn't happened in a while. But I'm going out to ComicsBeat, which tracks, comic sales, and they talk about graphic novel sales too. But they said the sales charts, Kitty Comics and Black Cat dominate a down month. So even though Black Cat did well, even though there were a couple of books that did well, overall June is still down. And of course, comic book sales are going to be down because we've got way fewer shops this year than we had last year, and way fewer shops than we had in 2016 for sure. So they said June sales charts reveal a sort of blah month after a sort of blah May, meaning we're in a sort of blah period. At least these blogs are starting to admit that things are down. And I literally do not care what your political affiliation is at all. I'm just like, at least you can admit that the comic book industry is in kind of a bind right now. Not in a very good place. So I think everybody can agree on that. So we're talking about Die Volume 1, Fantasy Heartbreaker, was a top graphic novel seller, but after that list, it's frankly shocking. Diamond goes by dollars when they say who won, but I'm going to use the unit list below because it shows raw numbers of copies that are being potentially sold to customers. Remember, these represent only orders from retailers, not sell-through. No fewer than half of the chart, more than half if you count My Hero Academia, which is like carrying manga and comics right now, is material for young readers. Tokyo Pop has more books than Image. Action Labs is on the list, and Dark Horse, IDW, and Marvel aren't. And these are books ordered by comics retailers, not bookstores, and they're kiddie books. One of the remaining books is an art poster book and not comic at all. what has happened. At any rate, these softened offerings explain the painful 16% drop in graphic novel unit sales from this quarter last year. The softening of the graphic novel market in comic shops and bookstores is a real problem at this point, one that isn't getting much attention outside publishers' meetings, perhaps. It gets a lot of attention on YouTube, but you know what? These blogs, they don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear it because it gets a lot of attention from people who cover comics in the comic book industry on YouTube. And you can call those people ComicsGate or whatever you want to call them, but people have been sounding the warning bells for years that the comic book industry is in dire straits. Now, we can argue over why that is, but it doesn't change the fact that it is. It is. And, it's, if you would stop listening to other people in the echo chamber, okay, these comic book blogs who have these sort of incestuous relationships with the publishers, and everybody's telling everybody else things are fine. Things are not fine. They're really not fine. They haven't been fine in a couple of years, but these bloggers are just starting to wake up to the fact that things are not fine. So John Jackson Miller has an analysis. And here's the opening. We can say two things for sure about the first half of 2019. DC released a lot fewer comic books, and Marvel came close to taking every shelf space its rival vacated. The result was that Marvel beat its own dollar sales performance from the first half of 2018, though not by as much. So DC slipped. The upshot is the direct market almost completely fell flat mid-year, down less than 0.5% in dollars. Now, when I was a kid, back in the day when I was living in Ohio, or wherever the hell Alan Moore thinks us Middle Americans live. Back in the day, summer was always super hot for comics because kids were out of school. They had a lot of the big releases. I remember, it just seemed like summer was like peak comic season. Like everybody was buying comics in the summer. All the new books were coming out in the summer. And now it's just like nobody cares. Nobody cares. Look at this. This isn't all bold. And every other comparison except one, they are down. Sometimes by double digits. Look at this. In every other comparison except one, they are down. Sometimes by double digits. The exception is Q2 19 versus Q1 19. But June to May, year to year in Q2 19 versus 18, sales are down even. Update, May was a 5-week month. So that's not even significant. Yeah, because May actually is going to do better. You have an extra week. Please note, this is not a we're doomed post, just noting facts. The softening of the graphic novel market is a problem. I'll be interested to see Milton and John Jackson Miller's analysis of the whole charts later because I'd like to see... No, I don't think there is a long tail. I don't think the long tail is going to make up for this at all. I think, look at this. Graphic novels down 18%, units down 15%. And, there seems to be a shift away from graphic novels. Everybody bet on graphic novels. And the market became saturated with graphic novels. We did a live stream with Peter Samedi at Alterna Comics a few weeks ago, and he was talking about that, how if they had continued to just publish graphic novels, they'd probably be out of business right now. If they continued to rely on the direct market, they would be out of business by now. And, blogs like The Beat, I've been reading The Beat for years, and for the most part, I do like their content, but the problem is that I think they were blindsided because they bet so heavy on graphic novels being the savior of the comic book industry that when the bottom fell out of graphic novels too, it caught a lot of people off guard. And you're even seeing it with, kind of the panic at Scholastic, I think. And again, this was talked about in the live stream with, or a different live stream with Peter Samedi, where Scholastic put a tweet out there that, hey, graphic novels are real books too. I'm like, why would they even put that out there? Because internally, from my understanding, even at Scholastic, even though they publish graphic novels, they don't think that highly of them compared to other books. They don't bring in the revenue that some of the other books have, and they're also a lot more costly to produce. So, we're kind of reaching a point now, I feel. Yeah, here we talk about My Hero Academia just like dominating sales. And we did a video on this too. with manga. Manga is hot again right now, and it's definitely eating into graphic novel sales. And this is kind of how the graphic novel boom started back in the mid 2000s, where manga did really, really well, and all these publishers wanted to jump onto it by creating like pseudo manga, and then that sort of morphed into doing more, graphic novels for a general audience. It looks like everything's kind of going back to manga now. I mean, My Hero Academia is just killing it. They're killing it. Top 20 adult graphic novels in June. How many My Hero Academias do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 of the top graphic novels are just My Hero Academia, and the rest of them, most of them look like they're manga. Except for Saga, we've got a Saga in there, and a couple other ones, but mostly it's manga. So, is it time to panic? It's been time to panic for 2 years. It's been time to panic for 2 years. And I'm sorry, demonizing ComicsGate when those people have figured out how to make hundreds of thousands of dollars off of indie comics projects. Hundreds of thousands, hundreds. Earthworm Jim, Doug Staples' Earthworm Jim just did like what, $700 and some $1,000. I mean, come on, this. I don't know what else to say to you guys. I really don't. Like, this isn't what you think it is. This is basically indie creators saving themselves from an imploding, dying comic book industry. And you can blame politics somewhat. I mean, I think politics come into play on some level. I do think it is off-putting to have your creators out there on Twitter every day attacking people for having different political opinions, because it's just like anything else. People want to be entertained. They don't want to be preached to. You're absolutely allowed to have your political beliefs. But, when you're trying to sell a product to as many people as you can, you might want to keep some of those opinions to yourselves. And certainly don't spend all day out there tweeting at people when you should be making better comics and trying to find better ways to sell comics. Alan Moore, I'm sorry, but ComicsGate's selling a lot of books. They're selling a lot of books. And this industry you're retiring from, it's not going to be around in a couple of years. So it's something has to change. And I'm waiting for it a year from now, 2 years from now, where, some of these blogs come back and they're like, you know what? Maybe ComicsGate was right. Maybe they were right. Maybe it's time to change it up. Maybe it's time to go back to customer focused comics. Maybe it's time to look at other distribution and sales channels than just trying to sell comic books and graphic novels through the direct market, which is failing miserably and dropping at an alarming rate. And I'm sorry, graphic novels are not going to save comics. Making comics people want to buy, that is what's going to save comics. So that's my 2 cents on it. Again, we don't talk a whole lot about comics here on Clownfish TV anymore, but this was, I thought, very, very important because there's a lot going on and it's going to happen. The end is going to come sooner than you think. We've already lost Vertigo. We've lost Mad Magazine. I think IDW, I'd be surprised if they make it another 2 years. The end is nigh. It absolutely is. And you can either find a better way to make a sustainable living doing comic books, or you can go down with the ship. It is entirely up to you. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but this is definitely not a career path I would advise anyone to follow. If you're gonna make comics, do it yourself. Hey guys, thanks for watching Clownfish TV. Please consider supporting the channel. Go to clownfishsupport.com. That's clownfishsupport.com. And if you want to join our community, go to clownfishtalk.com. That's clownfishtalk.com. Please subscribe, ring the bell for notifications. We will talk to you next time.